Kaelen Ashworth became king on the night his wolf found its mate, and he lost her on the very same night, though no one else in the room understood what that choice truly cost him. The healer's name was Elira Voss. She came from a family with no rank and no power, the kind of family the council barely noticed except when someone needed medicine. She had been asked to attend the coronation only because the old healer was ill, and she stood quietly near the back wall with her hands folded, watching a stranger become a king. She did not expect him to look at her the way he did. Kaelen felt it the moment their eyes met. It was not a feeling he could explain to anyone who had never carried a wolf inside their chest. It was recognition, sudden and complete, as if some part of him had been waiting his whole life just to see her face. His wolf rose inside him with a certainty that frightened him. This was his mate. There was no doubt, no confusion, nothing to question. He crossed the room before he had decided to move. By the time the sun rose, the bond was sealed. A mark had formed on both their skin, faint but unmistakable, the sign that two lives were now tied together in a way that could not be undone by ordinary means. Elira did not fully understand what had happened to her, only that something inside her had shifted, and that she felt, for the first time in her life, completely certain of something. She did not know that her happiness would last less than a full day. The council met with Kaelen before noon. They did not congratulate him. They reminded him, coldly and clearly, that the pack's survival depended on an alliance with the Nightshade bloodline, the only family strong enough to hold the northern border against a war that had been building for years. Lady Sarah Nightshade had been promised to him since childhood, not out of love, but out of necessity. A king without that alliance was a king who invited war upon his people. "You may keep your healer as a comfort," one council elder said, "but the throne requires Lady Sarah. If you refuse, the north will fall, and thousands will die for a choice made in one night of feeling." Kaelen argued. He fought for hours. He offered every solution he could think of, but the council was immovable, and the reports from the border grew worse by the day. Villages were already being raided. Soldiers were already being buried. The war was not a threat anymore. It was a countdown. In the end, Kaelen made a choice he would spend years regretting. There was an old ritual, one spoken of only in warnings, never in practice. It could break a completed bond, not through death, but through fire and blood, a ceremony that stripped the mark from the skin and silenced the wolf's memory of recognition. It was forbidden because of the pain it caused, and because of what it took from the person on the receiving end, a piece of themselves that could never fully return. Kaelen chose to use it on Elira without telling her what it would do. He told himself it was mercy. If she remembered him, if she carried the ache of an unfinished bond for the rest of her life, while he married another woman for the sake of peace, she would suffer far longer than a single, brutal night. He believed, in his own broken way, that he was protecting her by taking the choice away from her entirely. The ritual worked exactly as it was meant to. Elira woke the next morning with no mark on her skin, and no memory of why her chest ached with a grief she could not name. She left the Packlands before the sun had fully risen, telling no one where she was going, because something inside her insisted she did not belong there anymore. Kaelen kept his crown. He married Sarah Nightshade within the season. The war on the border ended before it could truly begin, and the pack celebrated a peace that had cost him more than any of them would ever know. His wolf never accepted the trade. For 3 years, Kaelen ruled a kingdom that thought he was strong, while something inside him quietly starved. He was polite to his wife. He was fair to his people. He signed treaties and settled disputes, and stood at the front of every ceremony with a straight back and steady voice. But at night, when the halls were empty, his wolf paced behind his ribs like an animal locked in a cage too small for it, searching for something it could not name and would never stop searching for. Elira built a different life, far from wolf territory, under a name that was not entirely her own. She became a healer known for her steady hands and her calm in the worst emergencies. She told herself the ache in her chest was simply a part of who she was, a kind of sadness with no clear cause, the sort of thing some people are simply born carrying. She never once suspected that something had been taken from her on purpose. Then the plague came. It began in the northern villages, the same villages the alliance with Sarah's family had once been meant to protect. Within weeks, It had spread along the border, killing faster than any healer could manage. Reports reached the capital of entire households lost overnight. The council, desperate, searched for anyone skilled enough to slow it down, and one name kept surfacing above all others. Kaelen recognized it the moment it was placed in front of him. He told himself it meant nothing, that healers with rare skill were simply rare, and that fate had nothing to do with which name reached his desk. But when her carriage arrived at the castle gates, and she stepped down with the same steady hands he remembered from a night he had spent 3 years trying to forget, his wolf rose inside him with a force that nearly brought him to his knees. She looked at him the way anyone looks at a king they have been summoned to serve. There was no flicker of memory in her eyes, no hint of recognition. She saw a ruler asking for her help, nothing more. It should have relieved him. Instead, it broke something in him all over again. Elira did not know why the castle unsettled her the way it did. She told herself it was simply the pressure of the task ahead, the weight of every life depending on her skill. But there were small moments she could not explain. The king's hand brushed hers once, while passing a set of medical instruments, and her whole body went still, as if something ancient inside her had just opened its eyes. A word he said in passing eased a panic in her chest before she even understood what he had said. She began to notice these moments building, one after another, and none of them made sense. She worked without rest for days, moving between the sick and the dying, refusing to stop even when exhaustion pulled at every part of her. Kaelen found himself drawn to wherever she worked, offering supplies, standing guard over rooms that did not need guarding, finding reasons to be near her that he barely admitted to himself. One evening, after a young mother had been saved by Elira's hands, Kaelen found her alone in a quiet hallway, staring at nothing in particular. "You look like someone carrying more than exhaustion," he said quietly. She turned to him, guarded. "I don't know you well enough for you to read me so easily." "No," he admitted, "you don't." Something in his voice made her study him more carefully. "Then why does it feel like I do?" The question hit him harder than any accusation could have. He looked at her for a long moment, and the guilt he had carried for 3 years rose up until he could no longer swallow it down. "Because you did," he said. "Once, I took that away from you." He told her everything. The bond, the mark, the ritual that had burned away her memory, to spare her a lifetime of aching for a man she could never have. He did not soften the truth, or ask for forgiveness. He told her because she deserved to know what had been done to her without her consent, even if it meant losing whatever fragile trust had begun to grow between them. Elira did not speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was quiet but sharp with anger. "You made a decision about my own body without asking me. You decided what pain I could and could not survive, as though I were a child who needed protecting from her own choices." "I know," he said. "I have known it every day since. Knowing it doesn't undo it." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." She walked away from him that night, and for the first time since she had arrived, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of the ache she had carried for years, without understanding it. It was not grief for a stranger, as she had always assumed. It was grief for something real, something that had been stolen from both of them in a single, brutal choice, made without her knowledge. The plague began to ease within the month, thanks to her work, and the council turned its attention back to matters of the throne. They summoned Kaelen once more, reminding him that with the border crisis behind them, it was time to fully honor his marriage and secure the North for good, meaning Elira's usefulness had ended, and her presence was no longer required. Kaelen stood before the council and said no. The bond was never truly destroyed, he told them. It was only silenced. "I was wrong to believe silence was mercy. I will not make that choice again, not for the sake of a crown, not for anyone's comfort but my own." The council warned him of the consequences. He accepted every one of them. Elira heard of his refusal before she left the castle grounds. She did not return to him because of the ritual, since some things cannot simply be undone by wishing them away. She returned because she had watched a king choose to risk everything rather than make another decision on her behalf, and because for the first time, he was offering her something he had denied her from the very beginning, a real choice of her own. They stood together in the same quiet hallway where the truth had first broken between them. "I am not asking you to forgive me," Kaelen said. I am asking if there is anything left worth building, now that you know everything." Elira studied him for a long moment, the ache in her chest finally making sense after 3 years of silence. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I would like to find out." It was not a happy ending, built on magic undoing every wrong. The mark did not return with a flash of light, and the years apart did not simply disappear, but something new began to grow between them, slower this time, built on honesty instead of secrecy, and on her own choice instead of his alone. Kaelen kept his crown, though only just, and only because he had been willing to lose it. Elira kept her name, her skill, and the memory of everything that had once been taken from her, and for the first time in 3 long years, the wolf inside him finally grew still, not because fate had demanded it, but because she had chosen, freely and completely, to stay.